Hey, welcome. I am very pleased to have Kristen Wilson here with us. She's a co-founder and co-owner of Action Potential Physical Therapy in Eastern Pennsylvania. And she's also the editor-in-chief now of Impact Magazine of the private practice section of the American Physical Therapy Association. I'm Sturdy McKee, business coach and advisor, and your host for the Focus Forward Business podcast. And it really is an honor and a privilege to have you here, Kristen. I really appreciate you agreeing to do this. Thanks.
Sturdy, awesome. Thank you so much. I'm an avid podcast listener. It's the first time I've ever been a guest on one, so I'm really pretty excited. Thank you.
Oh, cool. Yeah, well, that's overdue, but, but welcome. So will you please tell the viewers, listeners a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure, absolutely. So I kind of look at myself in three different buckets. So I've got my day job, my professional PT hat, and then I've got my what I call my social job. So my day job, like you mentioned, I'm co-owner of Action Potential Physical Therapy with Kathy Dixon. We are an outpatient one-on-one physical therapy clinic with 2 locations in Glen Mills and Kennett Square, Pennsylvania, which is about 30 minutes southwest of Philadelphia area. And, if I counter that with my professional PT hat, I'm an adjunct professor at a local university in their PT department. And then, like you mentioned, I have to say, I'm not editor-in-chief yet. In 4 days, I'll be editor-in-chief. So right now, currently the assistant editor for Impact, since our term will start in November. So really excited about that. But then there's probably my most important job, my social job. I am a wife of a physical therapist, in fact, and a mom of 3 boys, 11, 9, and almost 7. And then certainly super grateful to have a really fantastic group of friends and family, which, as I'm sure you would agree, during, the year of 2020 is absolutely necessary.
Yeah, so that's a lot to juggle. We'll get into a little bit more of that in a minute. But first, before we do that, tell me how you got started in business. What was your first business?
Well, so what's interesting, I think kind of what's fascinating about my business story is that I was never in outpatient physical therapy. I was an inpatient stroke therapist. So out of physical therapy school, I started at an inpatient hospital nearby and became a stroke specialist there, worked there for 9 years until my first son was born. During my time at that hospital, I met my now business partner, Kathy. And, after my first son was born, they told me at the hospital I wasn't able to come back to work part-time. I could only come back full-time or per diem, and I really needed to have that stable salary. So I started thinking about, okay, what could I do here to, get my professional needs met, but also my role of being a mom met? And started thinking outside the box, approached Kathy and said, hey, listen, I'm thinking that maybe we could do this on an outpatient basis and create a clinic that specialized in neurology, geriatrics, and amputee treatment. And so we opened in 2011 with this niche practice that was meant to be an outpatient neuro, geriatric, and amputee practice. And what we found, as this can open up a whole can of worms if we want to go down that path, was the hospital systems in our area outside of Philadelphia really had a stronghold on the outpatient treatment of those patient populations. And so we had to really think nimbly in those first couple of years. And we ended up shifting into, our niche being one-on-one physical therapy on an outpatient basis for a variety of different conditions. So, we made that transition and now are more of a traditional outpatient. But, certainly my story isn't that interesting. But what I do think is more interesting is kind of looking at that evolution of going from, I literally had never even submitted a charge as a physical therapist working in a hospital. I mean, I knew nothing about business. And, my dad is an entrepreneur. And Kathy and I Kathy's dad is an entrepreneur. And we were looking at each other like, what the heck are we going to do? We have no idea what we're doing. And I think what I really take to heart from that experience is the importance of resources and kind of access to resources. And during those early couple months, I found that there were so many resources at my disposal that were provided by PPS as well as some other leaders within the industry. So, certainly we wrote our business plan. I used the how to be a physical therapy business owner from the PPS manual. To write that. We went to a Rick Gowenda seminar, learned what charges were and how to submit, CPT codes and ICD-9 at the time codes. You know, I read Impact cover to cover, and just tried to get everything out of it I could. And I remember one day I opened Impact, and right on the front page was the editor's picture, and it was Jeff Ostrowski, who lives in my area. And I thought, well, he can't be a bad guy if he's an Impact. So I reached out and kind of cold called him and said, hey, listen, I'm thinking about starting a business. Will you mentor me? And he took us under his wing and really helped us get our feet. And I think what it really did, this whole process of this resource gathering, it gave me such an appreciation for the wonderful network that we as physical therapists share. I mean, we have so many tools, we have so many wonderful people in our profession. And I think it's so cool to be in a profession where everybody is just really passionate about what they do and they want it to work. And so I think that's kind of my better story about the history of where I am, is just kind of this appreciation for understanding that I would have never gotten here had I not had the support of other PT owners. So your point is well taken. This podcast is about, you know, sharing resources, and I couldn't agree more that it's so necessary.
Well, I mean, the only thing I would comment on that, other than it's a great story, is that's true. I found that to be true in all kinds of businesses. The irony is it seems that the busier the person is, the more notoriety, the bigger or whatever, you know, sometimes they are, the easier it is to access them. And they tend to be very generous in giving of their time. So if you're stuck, especially at the early stages or at any stage, reaching out to somebody, you know, it is very often successful. You'd be surprised at how often people are willing to help each other out. So yeah, that's a huge deal that I don't think enough people really appreciate. So thanks for bringing that up. That's cool. So you told us how you decided to start your business. Do you wish you had done anything differently in the beginning?
I'm going to wait until my dishwasher in the background there is going to stop rumbling. You can tell, like, this whole COVID working from home, and so soon the dog's going to start barking. My kids will walk in the door. Anyway, do I wish I would have done anything differently? There is one thing, Sturdy, that I think I was really slow to embrace. And in some ways, I think it's kind of a larger metaphor. You know, I tend to look at things from this little philosophical perspective, and I know you do too. So maybe you'll appreciate this answer. But, you know, when we first started, like I said, we didn't know what we were doing. So we really looked at like all these business books or, you know, guides to figure out like, what's the right way to do it? What's the business way to do things? And so we wrote our mission statement, and we had our values, and we felt like we really had a good foundation. And we created what we thought was our identity in our business. And so for a couple of years, you know, we really used that as our identity. And what we started to find out was that while those things told our story, it didn't really fully show who we were. And who we were was this awesome team, because at this point we had grown to a couple different team members in different areas, who were really dedicated to our clients. You know, we were smart in being nimble in the community and in the business world. But most importantly, out of all of those things, we were really weird. We were really quirky. So we had this fun, quirky element that we couldn't capture in like our mission, vision, and values well enough. Am I allowed to say a curse word on your podcast?
Sure.
Or is this like censored?
This is adults.
This is the HBO version. Okay, perfect. So, you know, one of my greatest colleagues who I've worked with literally my entire career, she moved from the hospital system with us when we opened our practice. She has over 25 years of experience as PT. She's a phenomenal therapist. She always had this saying where when patients would be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this works. Like, physical therapy is awesome. She'd be like, yeah, this shit works. This shit works. And so we would always joke, we're like, gosh, I wish we could make a t-shirt that said physical therapy, this shit works, and then put our logo on it. And this was, you know, we would joke about this for years and years and years. And finally I turned to Kathy and I was like, why don't we make that a t-shirt? Like, what is holding us back? That's who we are. Right. And, you know, the obvious answer is, well, it'll offend someone, blah, blah, blah. And kind of what we came back to was, well, if that offends you, then you probably shouldn't come to us for physical therapy, because that's who we are. And that's, you know, you will hear that when you're at therapy, likely, in obviously a professional context. And so what we did was we printed the shirts. We made our This Shit Works, you know, shirt, and we made the eye a little dumbbell. So it's a sweet, awesome shirt. And we got such great feedback from our clients about it, because they were like, oh, that's so you. I can't believe that you were able to, capture that in a shirt. And so the credit, of course, goes to my colleague Lori for the phrase, but oh, and it's copywritten, by the way, all you PTs out there. But what I loved about it is that it really was kind of more this metaphor for, my evolution as a person, Kathy's evolution as a person, our evolution as a business, that really we felt like we had really achieved success or felt like we were on the path to success when we really were comfortable with embracing who we were and what we could do and really championing our own strengths. And that felt so good. It felt great.
That is such an important point, and one that so many people shy away from. Dave Rendell's made most of his career around this. His first book was The Freak Factor. Stan Phelps and Dave wrote a book called Think Goldfish, and there are things in it. I really like them, because there are tactical things in it around this very thing. Taking that thing that makes you different and accentuating it, exaggerating it, dialing it up. How else do people really know who you are? And that runs very counter to a lot. I was about to say just our education, but it's not just school and education. It's also the cultures in so many different groups and professions, right? If you're outside the norm, then you're at a conference, you're not ostracized perhaps, but you're looked at a little weird, right? You're not accepted with some folks because you're bucking the status quo, right? You're not following along with the crowd. But that's a huge one too. I mean, school tries to make us normal, right? Shore up your weaknesses. And if you do that, I love this. If you do that, the most you can ever hope for is mediocrity. Okay. And if you're really, in order to be excellent, like taking those things that people say are unique or different or weird about you, excellence by its definition is a form of deviance. And I love that, because if you take that and dial that shit up, right, you're going to be noticeable, remarkable, so worthy of talking about.
And I think the other part of that too, Sturdy, that you've mentioned is, school's job isn't really to build unique characters, right? It's to create a foundation, right? Like in school, you get the foundation and you learn what are the basics that are necessary. It's then taking that and understanding where can I excel, and not excel in skills, but excel in myself, right? What can I bring of myself that builds upon that foundation? So yeah, I mean, when you go to any physical therapist, you're going to get a concrete foundation of similar skills, but each person, whether they're PT, a lawyer, accountant, whatever it is going to bring a certain set of their own uniqueness. And I think the more challenging part isn't probably identifying what your strengths are, but not being afraid to know that some people might not like it. And I think that's that part about, this shit works t-shirt. Like there are people that don't like that shirt. They think that it's offensive or not professional. And that's okay. That's okay. And it took us a while to understand that, sometimes your own strengths might be someone else's weakness. And that's okay too. And not to say that there's any reason to be unprofessional or disrespectful by any means.
It's not right. It's not gratuitous, right? You're doing it because that fits with the theme and who you are. Yeah, no, I love it.
And your conference part, I just have to follow back on for a second. Going to a conference is so intimidating because you don't know what you're getting, right? And if you don't have, I remember going to my first PPS concert, felt like a conference. And I walked in, I knew one person there. I knew Jeff Ostrowski from his picture on the inside cover of Impact magazine, practically. I didn't know anyone. And so you walk into the conference and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm an outsider anyway. Even if I look exactly the same and say the same phrases and use the same cliche attributes, I don't know anybody. I feel so out of it. And it's taken a while to understand that, it's okay to be the different person or to have a different mindset. And I actually really gravitate towards people that do that. I think it's an incredible sign of strength.
Cool. Thank you. That's a big one. So Kristen, we're all busy, right? And our culture tends to kind of glorify being busy and busyness. You're obviously busy, taking on the editor role, 3 kids, business. There's probably other stuff we don't know about too, but what advice would you give a business owner who's struggling with not having enough time?
Sturdy, I think that's a great question. And here's the answer. And I want to preface this by saying in no way, shape, or form am I belittling someone's sense of busy. Okay. But I think one of the greatest pieces of advice I ever got on this topic, it was actually from my husband. And he said, you need to reframe the issue. Everybody's busy, and everybody's busy is the busiest that they can be. And, there's always enough time for the things that you need to make happen. And I thought that was a really clever way to look at it. And so my first step in kind of shifting that mindset was, when you go to a cocktail party or you go out to like your kid's sporting event and you see somebody, you're like, oh, what have you been up to? And they're like, oh, I'm so busy. Well, I started to realize everybody says that. It's just like the catchphrase, I'm so busy. So I actually eradicated that from my vocabulary, because when you say constantly, I'm so busy, you're essentially reinforcing in your mind that you don't have time for the things that matter, when all of us really, truly do have time for the things that matter. So I think the best way that I can answer it is that way. Try to shift your mindset, because you're right. There's always going to be 1,000 things on the to-do list. There's always going to be all these balls that you need to juggle, but there's always a way to make time for that. Now, if you ask me the strategic approach to that, my two ways that I manage my time are I use the David Allen Getting Things Done methodology, which has been incredibly helpful for me. Looks at, 50,000 view, 40,000 view, roles and purposes, all it kind of breaks everything down. And then there's a great app that goes along with that called OmniFocus. So I use that to just kind of manage that high level stuff. And then I am an old school to-do list person. So it's actually sitting right here. Here's my day's to-do list. I make one every single day. And then I prioritize it by what are the things that are most important for that day. And I will write everything on there, like, read with the kids, do the laundry, edit, impact, whatever it is. I try to make those things all on my list so that I can hierarchically organize them, because I know that I can get to the most important things. And then the things that are less important, they're down on the list and I just have to carve out time later. So it's not a great answer, but I think.
Kristen, that was a great answer, because what you're drawing out there is the prioritization piece. We all can, and we brainstorm these lists and we put the stuff down, whether we do it daily, weekly, or whenever. And it just seems sometimes overwhelming. But if you take that next step of what you can do, I do a couple other steps, but that's prioritizing what's important. And then there will and may be things that you don't get to.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, Sturdy, is, I when I teach at the university, we talk about, going in and doing an eval, right? And as a student, you think that when you go into that eval, you've got to get all that information, right? Because you got to document it. Got to go in the EMR. And so people are like lunatics, and they like don't even say hello to the patient or make eye contact because they're trying to like take range of motion measurements, and they're crazy. And so what I teach the students is, listen, there's always another day. Right. Your job during that eval is to make them come back another day. So when I look at, my to-do list, my job is to get the things done that have to be done, but there's always another day. And there's some things that are they just trump productivity. And that's things like spending time with the family. Last night I hosted a birthday dinner for my husband. That took way priority over anything else on my to-do list. So I think it's about, like you said, understanding the hierarchy and being comfortable knowing that, if you don't get your to-do list done, you're still a good person. You're still a good human.
It will be there tomorrow too.
It'll be there tomorrow. I assure you that 100%.
Cool. So this is another one of part of that sharing thing. In business, there are problems, there are challenges every day. And we sometimes will look at somebody who's farther down the road or doing something different and think, oh, their life is all, unicorns and rainbows and butterflies and stuff. So what challenges, what problems are you kind of facing or dealing with in your business today?
I had to laugh when I was thinking about this. My answer is the same as Stacey Menz's. So clearly we share a brain when we're editing, and apparently we share a brain in business as well. But I absolutely think that the thing that as a business person I'm struggling the most with is understanding how to properly forecast financials. And I will say two resources that have been incredibly helpful with this are my peer-to-peer group and my peer-to-peer network, which has really worked together to help teach each other how to do that. And then my course field has put together some great resources to help do that. And then he did a little bit of one-on-one counseling with me. And that was so helpful in just being able to sit down and say like, okay, here I am, cash flow tight after COVID. How can I look ahead? And his suggestion was you just need to know your break even. You need to understand what your break even is, and then understand your your revenue to expense ratio. And so when I broke things down that way, it was so much more helpful, but still something I continue to struggle with. But I will say, Sturdy, I want to share one that was really surprising. And this was an issue, a problem that we were facing, and we've come to like a pretty good resolution from it. And I thought it was so unique that I'm hoping you don't mind if I share too.
No, not at all.
COVID has been happening for this past 7 months. And, early on, everybody was so in it. And, Kathy and I are blocking and tackling. We're literally trying to keep the doors open, figure out who we're furloughing, all these like crazy decisions. And we get to October and our whole staff is back whole. And we're like, yes, okay, we survived. We're doing things like, this is great. And I just assumed that, we had weathered the storm relatively well, right? I mean, here we are, we're all back full time. The doors are still open. We had just opened our second location 2 weeks before COVID. It didn't burn down, like things, we're okay. Well, within the course of 3 days, every single one of our team members, pulled either Kathy or myself aside to discuss the fact that there was a major culture issue in the company. Unbeknownst to us, they were each having their own issue with feeling like there was competition between the offices, or feeling like the communication had broken down, feeling like Kathy and I weren't accessible as leaders because they were afraid to stress us out because they were so fearful of putting too much more on our plate. So it was this really beautiful juxtaposition to where Kathy and I were like, yes, we're doing awesome, to holy crap, our whole team is falling apart. And I honestly, Kathy tells me this, and we both just literally start crying. We're like, what are we going to do? Like, we thought things were okay. And here it's actually worse now than it was back in March and April, when like the proverbial shit was literally hitting the fan. And so it just was so shocking to me, Sturdy, to see how long it took for everybody to ride that wave and crash at different points.
Right.
And the fact that here we were 7 months, 6 months, 7 months later after this happened, and everybody crashed at the same time. And so what we did was we had an emergency, a very immediate team meeting. We called it a pep rally. We got everybody together and we addressed all of the issues that had been brought to our attention. We made a little bit of staffing shift with leadership to put one of us in each clinic. And we just offered an opportunity for everyone to be heard. And then we closed the meeting by creating some element of predictability. Because I think that's what it was that had everybody so up in arms, was we've been maneuvering for so long that people felt like there wasn't a clear path. And so what we did was we set a path. And we said, here's what you can predict for the rest of 2020, because this year has been a cluster F of unpredictability. So let me give you 3 months of predictability so that you can at least ride this through. And it was a really awesome lesson for Kathy and I to understand that, like, while we felt like we had things in control, we needed to make sure that everybody felt in control. And so by sharing that predictability, it really right-sized the ship. And so in one 40-minute meeting, we went from what felt like, oh my God, this is the end of our business, to disaster, to honestly like a hoorah pep rally where everybody was like practically hugging socially distanced hugging when we left. So it was a really cool experience. And I was really grateful to have gone through that.
Cool. Well, and that's so cool that you would say that too, Kristen, is I'm really grateful to have gone through it, because we don't think we always look at the challenges and the things that fall apart. But I mean, everybody listening to this is a problem solver, right? You're in business, you solve problems. So these things happen, they will happen. When there's a problem, it's an opportunity to step up and do the thing that you do really well. I love the attitude too. That's cool. So here's another one, and maybe this is the answer, or that was the answer to this, but what's been your proudest moment in your business?
That's another hard question. So I'm gonna break it up into, I have my 3 buckets of who I am. I'm gonna break it up into 3 proudest moments, because if you ask me my favorite song, I can't give you one. Like, it depends on my mood, what time of day it is. So it's hard for me to pick a proudest moment. but I can probably break it down into three. So if I had to say my proudest action potential moment, this is a little bit of a silly one, but my business is in the hometown I grew up in. And in our third year of business, we started a fundraiser 5K. And we do a Thanksgiving Day turkey trot, and it's hosted at my high school, the high school I went to. And we have grown this race over the past 8 years to, last year was 850 racers. So it's a pretty cool size race now, and we make a pretty sizable donation to charity, which always feels great. But what's awesome is the first time that we had a certified racetrack, the race starts by running up the driveway of my high school, and it's an uphill driveway. And so the race goes off. We have about 700 people that are doing the race that year. And, you know, I'm standing there like doing the air horn and like shouting and cheering. And everybody runs by, and I turn, oh God, I'm gonna get emotional. I turn and I look up the driveway of the high school that I went to in the town that I love, supporting the business that I founded. And I see 700 people wearing my shirt. And it just like took my breath away. It took my breath away. And I was so proud, not for me, but just the fact that the community had rallied. And it was such a cool feeling. It was such a cool feeling to be standing there on my high school graduation spot and watching all these people wearing my shirt. It was so cool. Sorry, don't mind the tears.
Great. No, that's awesome.
All right, I'll do my PPS one, which is my professional one. I was really humbled and asked to do a Graham speech at the Graham sessions. And, you know, that in and of itself could be the proudest moment. But certainly, if anyone has seen the speech or heard it, it was a very difficult moment for me because it was very personal. And what was so cool about that speech and why I'm so proud of it is I stood up there and, you know, I just finished reading Daring Greatly, Brene Brown. And she talks about being vulnerable and like, you know, not understanding, you know, how people are going to judge you, but still having the confidence to stand up and be yourself. And I did that during that speech, kind of in this no holds barred fashion of like, well, this is either going to be the beginning or the end. And and the feedback that I got afterwards was so heartwarming in terms of the appreciation for having shared such a vulnerable experience. And I was really very proud that one I can say I was very proud of myself for being able to stand up there and do that in a room. For anyone who hasn't been to Graham sessions, it's so scary. It's a room of really high powered, amazing thinkers and brilliant minds. And to stand up there and like literally like vomit your soul onto the stage in front of like everyone who thinks big thoughts was an incredibly humbling and vulnerable experience. So that would be my professional moment.
Cool. Thanks. That's awesome.
I got to share my mom moment.
Okay.
And then I'll be done with this. And I'm such an emotional person. You're probably like, oh God, I hope no one ever asks her on a podcast again. No. My proudest mom moment is, this one's a little bit silly, but all three of my boys independently while at school, when asked what they wanted to be when they grew up, all three boys said they wanted to be a physical therapist.
Really?
Yeah, all three. And they have totally different personalities, totally different. And what I think is so cool and why I'm so proud about this is not because like, oh, great, you want to like be like your mom. It's that they see the lifestyle of what a physical therapist provides, meaning the caring nature, the professional diligence, the acting on behalf of society. And they really see that and they embrace that. And I thought that was such a cool thing. Like, gosh, and I think our profession is the greatest profession on the planet. But to see each of my three kids with each of their completely different personalities and strengths understand the importance of what our profession does for society was such a cool thing.
That is cool. Thanks for sharing that one too. Very cool. So here's another one for you, another maybe lesson that you can share. I know successful people are always learning and always, you know, trying to be better at whatever it is they do. But so what's the biggest thing you've learned recently that you wish you had learned 10 years ago?
You know, Sri, that's a hard one. I think one that, and I kind of already shared about this a little bit with regards to kind of our process with the business, but I think the one thing that has really resonated with me in the past year is being comfortable with who you are and understanding that when you're comfortable with who you are and how you feel and how you treat people, and understanding kind of this comfort with who you've become, it's a really rewarding feeling to just be able to sit comfortably in your skin. And I think part of what has made that evolution very lengthy for me, and I'm kind of speaking to some of the women in the audience that have also been kind of wearing that dual hat of like mom and business person, is when you constantly have to change between two very important hats and especially when your kids are younger, it's very hard to find an identity, because you're trying to wear hats that in some cases can be very conflicting. And there's always outside forces, there's other moms that are telling you need to be a better mom, and you missed the Halloween parade, and I was at PPS one year and I wasn't there for the Halloween parade and my kid's costume broke and I was the worst mom ever. And then then you've got like the business ear of seeing all of these young or similarly aged male counterparts whose businesses are growing so much faster because they're able to focus more on their business instead of having to wear these two hats. So there's these very strange juxtapositions that pull you in different directions. And I never felt like I knew where I was. And so having that ability to really find out who I was and what I needed was such a great lesson. And I think if I had to summarize all of that diatribe into one sentence, it would be, being true to yourself and meeting your needs first. Because if I meet my needs first, and that's not meant to sound selfish, it's really just meant to say, if I meet my needs first, I am that much better to everybody else around me. And I can't meet my needs unless I know what I need. So it was really this big process I've been going through of figuring out what are my needs, who am I, and how can I use those to make me better in all areas.
It's the cliche, but it's the airplane, put your own mask on first.
Yes.
Right. If you don't, you can't. You got to, and that's a huge one, I think, for all business owners too, is taking care of yourself, your mental and physical well-being, so that you can then be that person that serves and leads and takes care of your staff, your team, your customers, your family. Because without, the wheels can come off. Right.
Quickly. Yeah. And the other thing, Sturdy, is I feel like, as any business owner, you're constantly looking for resources and feedback and guidance. And sometimes I remember in the past, I would read something and be like, oh, you should get up and wake up early every morning and journal for 30 minutes and then do the hardest work that you have. Well, I'm not an early riser. So when I tried to do that, it was a brutal failure. And I was like, God, I'm never going to make it in the business world. I can't do this get up at 5 a.m. thing. And then I realized, well, if I sleep in and then do my best work from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m., I'm still cool. That's great. I can still do that.
Exactly.
And it's taking all of these little pieces and then understanding, okay, well, yeah, that's all great information, but what do I need and how can I use these to my benefit?
If Kristen, if we all did all the advice, if we did everything that people tell us, there would be no time to eat, right?
Honest to God. I started journaling and I would get stressed out. Oh my God, I didn't journal today. I'm like, wait, why am I stressed out about journaling? That's like the antithesis of journaling.
Right. What I found too is one of the things around advice, and one of the reasons I like this experience share, and I learned that in my days in EO, is people will take your experiences for what they are and kind of filter and use what they can, or, it's not telling somebody, directing somebody what they ought to be doing, versus when we ask for advice, most of the time we get told what to do. But then beyond that, we get told basically whatever worked for that person. Right. And that's one of those things that as a coach, I've really learned not to do. Share experiences, but your context, your situation, your goals, where you want to go, everything's different. So if something worked for me, that's great, I'll share it, but I'm not going to tell you that's the only path or the only thing you can do, and I think that's so important for all of us as, taking that coaching mentality into our businesses as leaders as well, because your staff, your team, your customers, your patients, same thing, right? And you're talking about your kids, they're all different personalities, mine too. What worked for me growing up, in the 70s and 80s may not be the best thing for a different personality here, in 2020. So yeah, we got to figure that stuff out together, not just direct and tell. So that's another wonderful point. Thank you for sharing that. You've already dropped a couple titles, but are there any other business books that are like your favorites that stand out that you would recommend for reading for folks?
Yeah, I mean, my goodness, picking a favorite business book is like picking a favorite child. That one's a hard one because, like you said, I like the smorgasbord.
You don't have to pick one.
It's like a smorgasbord. I like to like sample from each little thing. So, a couple that I've loved, Traction. I learned a lot about organization of meetings through that. And Kathy and I utilize that strategy a lot for our quarterly strategic meetings. Conversational capacity, that's taught me a lot about direct and non-confrontational communication. I mentioned Daring Greatly, which I think is a must read for anybody. And I just started, I'm literally one page in to Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets. So it's making decisions in the face of uncertainty, and what better than 2020 to try and, make some sense of uncertainty. But, I often look for other sources of business inspiration. And one book that I really love in particular, maybe you've heard it, it's not a bestseller. It is the book Little Blue Truck by Alice Schertle. It's a children's board book. And I have to say, that book really resonated with me from a business perspective. So I'll just give you a quick summary. Little Blue Truck. Do you know this book?
No.
Oh my gosh, this is my favorite.
I got 3 other children's books that are great management books too.
Is one of them Giraffes Can't Dance?
No.
Oh, that's my other favorite one.
That's going to be like the Saggy Baggy Elephant.
All right, you gotta look up both of those. So Little Blue Truck is this really adorable little blue truck, and he drives along the road and he says hi to all his friends along the way, and all his friends love him. And he's kind of driving through the countryside, and all of a sudden this humongous dump truck comes barreling down. He's honking his horn, blowing off all the animals, and he ends up getting stuck in this huge mud pile. And he's like, the dump truck is like, help me. And all the animals are like, F off, buddy. Like, you just blew by us and didn't pay us any mind. And sure enough, you turn the page and Little Blue Truck puts his way into the mud pile and starts pushing the dump truck out. And he can't do it. The dump truck's too big. So all the other little animals come and they push the Little Blue Truck, who then pushes the dump truck, and they get the guy out. And the dump truck turns and says, it's amazing what you can do when you have good support and good friends. And I thought that was such a cool business metaphor, because here we are in PT, we're so easy to say all the, the dump trucks that are coming through, payment reform, hospital systems, whatever it is, consolidating PT companies. And we're always quick to, judge. But really, if we all stick together, we can definitely overcome these challenges. And not only that, but we're going to make the best of it. And I think it really speaks to the importance in our organization. And one of the frustrations I see right now in the PT profession is that there's a lot of fragmentation. And I think it's so disheartening, because here we are, this profession that helps people and binds people together, empowers people. But instead, right now, we're casting stones at each other and using our energies to kind of bifurcate in some ways. And I'd love to see that we start to really work together as a community and help to really empower each other even more. I think there's definitely some factions that do that already, but I want to see it even more, because I think that, the dump truck is only as scary as we let it be. When the rest of us are all there kind of pushing it along, we're going to be okay. We'll be fine. And then we'll all pile in the Little Blue Truck and we'll sail off to, PT heaven, I guess. I don't know.
Cool.
So that's my vote. That's my vote for best business book.
I love it. No, that's a good one to add to the list. All right, cool. Before we wrap up, any other thoughts you want to leave us with?
This has been a lot of fun, Sturdy. I really appreciate it. I think my only closing thought would be kind of just a little call to action to people listening. Like, hey, if you have ideas, get involved in something, whatever it is, because I guess kind of echoing my previous sentiment, I think when we all work together and when we all kind of chip in, we're going to start to see that things are going to make a change positively, whether that's in our profession or in the society, whatever it is. We're in a tough spot right now in 2020 across the globe. And I think we can easily raise our voices in anger, or we can easily be cantankerous about things, but I think we'll be far more productive and far more satisfied when we get involved and help each other to succeed, however that may look. So I guess that's my closing thoughts is I just hope that people listening, you know, maybe share that same sentiment, because I'm looking forward to turning the page on this year and instead embracing this really great opportunity for kind of building up everyone around us.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for that. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed having the conversation. So thanks, Kristen, for being here.
Sturdy, it's been great. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Take care.